Hey Adventurers, today we will be getting back into our more regular schedule, I guess, for weekly videos. And so Mondays I'm trying to do a review or some other type of more important, heavier video, I guess. I don't know how to explain, but I'm trying to get back into that flow of doing reviews on Mondays and stuff like that. Now that the end of the year stuff is pretty much all over and we can put that behind us and continue on with our year, I will get back to the reviews. Today will be a book review for Mrs. Mike by Benedict and Nancy Freedman. This is a historical fiction novel set in Great Northwest Territories, Canada, that area. I don't know the exact location because I didn't pay that much attention and I don't know Canada really very well at all. Anyways, that's enough preamble and ramble and everything. So this will mostly just be my thoughts on the book. We'll see how it goes. I was requested to do this by my friend Bren. She also read it at around the same time as me and told me, or once I finished it, she's like, "Oh, can you do a review of it?" So I was like, "Okay, I guess I can." I wasn't really planning on it, but since it was a request, I will do it. So when I picked this book up, I wasn't particularly interested in reading it, and even while I was reading it, I wasn't really very invested in the story, but that disinterest did not stop me from appreciating and seeing a great story. So I read the book. I wasn't really that invested throughout the entire thing. I wasn't really super invested going into it. And then by the end of the book, I came out of it thinking, okay, that was a good book. I am glad that I read it. The story is primarily set in the Great Northwest Territories, like I already mentioned. It follows a young girl from Boston as she starts a new life. She initially goes to, I forget where she initially goes, somewhere in Canada because the doctor recommended for her health that she would go be in a place with fresh air, clean air, stuff like that. That's not Boston essentially. So she left Boston, went up north to Canada and stayed with her uncle, and then she moves to Great Northwest Territories somewhere and starts a life there. It follows the trials and struggles of living in such a harsh frontier so far away from civilization in like the early 1900s. So this is before it starts before and goes till a little bit after World War I. So we don't really have an exact, I don't remember the exact years that it encompasses, but I know it's early 1900s for sure. Because it was northwestern Canada, I was able to relate and to understand the landscape and climate in a way that is rare for someone who's lived in Alaska all their life. Basically, I know Alaska, that area of Canada, Great Northwest Territories, that's what borders Alaska, and it's fairly similar in setting, I guess. Just it's very similar to Alaska in many ways, and so I was able to understand that and be able to be invested in it that way because I understood what it was supposed to look like, what the landscape was like and everything. And the setting was absolutely a major part of why I ended up enjoying the book as much as I did. I had a handful of issues with certain wording choices towards the end of the book that the way they were worded implied one thing. Not really, because you knew what you were expecting, but if you were just taking the way that sentence was phrased or whatever, you'd be like, oh, this is what it's implying, but then that's not how it works. I can't really do that because it kind of spoils a little bit of the story, but there were a few times like that where I was just a little bit annoyed with the wording just because I don't like when the way that something is worded implies something different than what it is, unless it's purposeful, which it wasn't really purposeful in that instance. But really it was the ending of this book that took me from a meh, it was fine, just not for me type of book to a wow, that ended up being one of the best books I read in 2021. So there was quite a bit of difference from what I was expecting going into it and what I ended with. There was a section right towards the end that I was like, oh, they're gonna ruin the book, I'm gonna end up hating this book, and it's not gonna be worth my time anymore to read this book. And so I was fully expecting that, but then right at the end it fixed it and ended up turning it around and making me really enjoy the story and the path that the book took. Overall, it just really ended up being a book that I was more than pleasantly surprised by. I was expecting to have to kind of force myself through it as I went, and I did have to force myself to keep going as I was starting into it because I wasn't invested, like I mentioned. But by the time I got to the end, I really ended up feeling like it was a book that was worthwhile to read, and I was very happy that I read it. Very rarely do I feel like there's a book that was not worth the time that I spent reading it, but occasionally there's books that are just like, okay, that was very much worth my time. I'm very happy that I read it. And that's what this Mrs. Mike was for me. It wasn't so much that it was anything new or important or massive in terms of literary accomplishments or anything like that, but just the story that was being told and the way it was being told and the themes that were presented were able to take me from I don't care about this book to I do care about this book. I think this book ended really well. And that ending tied everything together in a way that made me appreciate the whole journey that we had been on. If you like historical fiction, I definitely recommend that you read this book. I'm sure it won't be for everybody, and I'm surprised that it worked for me as well as it did, but I know that I tend to enjoy historical fiction a lot more than I think I will, I guess we'll put it that way. I know that I enjoy and love historical fiction, but then when I read it, it's better than I was expecting, pretty much all the time. And I'm very happy to have read this book. Overall, I really ended up enjoying the book. I thought for a book that I was expecting to not love, it ended up being one that I really enjoyed. So that was really good. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay well.